factor, right? Okay. So, how many of you have had the chance to work with BIM in a classroom sort of setting, to experiment with programs, things like that? Let me see. Okay, so there's a good amount there. All right. How many people in the room have had a chance to work with building information modeling on a project in a live setting? Okay, we still have some there. All right. How many of those of you that just raised your hand felt it was successful? That's pretty good. Almost all of them. That's really good. It's maturing. It's doing quite well. See, I'm going to be a great follow-up to Ralph, who presented just before lunch, because the things that he was talking about, change and being a change agent, you could almost just flip our slides out, and it's almost the same presentation. So all during lunch, my mind's been reeling about how to put another spin on this directly for you as a group who just got a long conversation about being a change agent. And he had clips of JFK, and I don't have JFK, so mine's not nearly as good. So what we're going to do is just adjust it a little bit. See, mine came into this lean into success. How many of you are familiar with lean? There, okay, quite a good group. How many of you have actually applied lean? Applied it, either on a project or yourself? All right, so we need to stick with the lean side of this and what lean is. That'll work better. There's going to be lots of BIM involved here, but it sounds like we're going to run down a lean course and focus on that as we go through the slides. Now, as you can tell, I want to make this for you as a group. That's what I'm here to do. And so questions are great. Comments are great, right? If I talk about this frequently, and so if I gloss over something that just, you're like, wait, what is that? Why? Right? Ralph just told you before lunch, ask why. I'm all about you asking why, right? And I'm no problem taking it to 5 whys, because that is a principle of lean construction, is whenever something's not right, to ask 5 whys to get to the real bottom and the core of what needs to be changed. And so hopefully we'll get to quite a few whys as we go through this today. So my rules are, if you want my attention, you raise your hand. You can call out. Please don't throw anything. That's where I draw the line, okay? And so, but I'll be happy to address this as we go through. Because what I realized as construction, because I had a chance to get a construction management degree. I think many of you are on that same road, especially some of the gentlemen I talked to at lunch. So what I found is when we're in school, you know, it's pretty clean. It's pretty straightforward. You have direct deliverables. You have clean semesters. You know when a class is coming and going. In fact, they usually give you a pretty strict guideline of like which classes you should take, which semester to get you through. I see some heads nodding in here. I know a lot of that happens. And then what happens is you graduate and you get a job and the race changes, right? All of a sudden we get on a project and there aren't clear goals. There aren't clear deliverables. In fact, quite often I'm dealing with owners that don't know what they want other than a building, right? I love that. They say, how much will it cost building a building? Well, what kind of building do you want? And then, well, an office space? All right, that's good. Okay, we're making progress. Now, let's see, you want an office space. Now, do you want an office space kind of just like a strip mall? Or are we talking like a corporate headquarters sort of office space? And we have to start asking those questions. And we've got to dive into those whys. And we can't be afraid of them to figure out what's going on, because it is messy. And so what I found is when I'm going through these projects, my primary goal and my purpose, and Ralph talked to you about that earlier, didn't you? Have a purpose? Our purpose is to provide value, right? To bring value to these clients, whatever form or shape that might be. And so one of the main reasons and ways that we strive, or I strive personally, to increase that value is by being lean. I want to remove waste, create flow, and in general, increase value, because there is so much waste around us. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Like 30% of buildings end up in landfills, right? 70% of them end up where they are, and 30% of everything that goes out there is just waste. We can do better than that. There's so many ways we can do better. And we talk about waste. That was actual physical waste that gets in a landfill. Let's talk about productivity and human human time and human effort and how that's wasted. How many of you have seen this before, this graph? Ooh, we hit a gold mine. All right. So, Paul Chiklos, I think I said that right. Any Russians in here can say that right for me? None. Okay. So, he did this graph. The first time I saw it was 10 years ago, 2002. He started in 1964. He used that as a baseline. Your black line that climbs up here nicely is all non-farm industries productivity with a 1964 baseline. So, start in 1964 and say, okay, they were 100% productive, and then we start measuring. And when we come along, we get to 2012, 2.5 times more productive than was put out then. All of these other lines are construction. Right? Now, there's a whole bunch of lines because when he did it in 2002, he just did one line. And everybody asked, well, did you count for the deflated annual consumer index? Did you count for inflation? Did you count for the housing market? I think people started hounding him with questions, and he said, not this time. So he just took all those things into factor and he produced the same graph again. It didn't get any better no matter how you shake it, right? We just have a general problem in the construction industry. Now, I love building buildings. I love being in construction. It's what I was meant to do. And I find this personally embarrassing. And so I want to strive to change this. And I think that every one of you in here can be a significant factor in changing what's happening with us. We are less productive than we were 50 years ago. Now, I had the opportunity to discuss this slide with a group of managers last week, and somebody raises his hand. Well, our workforce just isn't what it used to be. I have to tell you that this non-farm group is using the exact same workforce that the construction guys are using. It's the same group of people, same schools. I got 2 questions going on. I'm going to go with you first, sir.
Does that take into consideration safety and quality that we don't use that for?
Okay, so the question was, does it account for safety and quality and those sort of issues? Okay, I can tell you that even though construction safety, it is a very important factor, in construction, we as an industry are actually pretty lax if you compare ourselves to a Toyota or a Nissan or a Ford. You get in those manufacturing facilities, or a Chevron or a BP, you get in those facilities and safety is steps above what we do in construction. So yeah, it really does account for safety. All right?
But their safety has been replaced by automated process machines. Our safety has been replaced by the thing
Okay. So the comment was that their safety has been replaced by automating processes, and our safety has been replaced by human factors. I would tell you that you are hitting it. You are in the right direction right there. Okay? What is your thoughts?
Well, I was just curious if there's any other countries in the world that have improved their construction productivity, or is this just worldwide, reflecting more worldwide?
Okay. So this is the question was, is there other countries, do we have a productivity index for them, and to compare against and see if this is a international trend or if this is just a U.S. trend? I don't know that. I would love to have that information. I would like to think that it's probably, I don't know. That is a very good question. I have some good international people here that might be able to answer that for me later. What is your thoughts?
Does this take into account the amount of time and process put into backup documentation for litigation purposes?
Okay. Does this take into account the time and documentation for backup and litigation? Yeah, it does. I think along with lack of industrialization, which was our comment before, and the whole let's try to cover ourselves factor, if we're just talking about a cover ourselves factor, we don't have to print little labels on our building that says walking upstairs might be hazardous to your health. Please be careful when walking upstairs. We haven't gotten that far yet, right? But yes, I do see that on those little gum packets. Wait, those aren't gum, those are silicone. I'm not supposed to eat those, right? You see those, right? Do not eat this. Okay, so yeah, it probably does cover the, that sort of factor right there, doesn't it? And so all in all, what I think we're back to is we need to be more efficient in our workforce and our manpower. And that's what it comes down to. Everybody else has industrialized, and construction has not. And as you go through today, I propose to you that BIM gives us the opportunity to industrialize that we've never had before. We are just now on the verge of the computers being powerful enough to let us do it. Before, they just couldn't do it. It was all up to the human factor to bring it into play. And now we can get some assistance in there. And so what I want to do is walk you through kind of our lean process and thoughts on 3 distinct buildings: a courthouse, a prison, and a set of corporate headquarters. And this spans multiple years of construction work. And talk about some of our implementations, and the whole idea is lean, continuous improvement. It's Kaizen. So here, let me next slide, right there for you. Continuous incremental improvement. And give you examples and scenarios where we made those steps and we made those improvements, not because you're going to go back and make the same steps and the same improvements. I'm hoping you'll learn from me and you'll just pick up right where I stepped off, and then you'll make your own improvements and your own steps in order to make us more productive, to change that productivity chart that I showed you a little while ago. So let's talk about a couple of the ideas. That courthouse, first project. The schedule was the primary means of managing that project. Now, it was a BIM project too, but this was a pilot project for BIM. It was the very beginning. And so what we ended up with was falling back to the schedule, and you'll hear lots of stuff. You have to have a schedule on a project, and you have to do it, and you have to follow it. But what happens is so many projects don't use the tool that's right there in their hands. That schedule is a piece of paper that sits on a desk or gets reported on monthly and things like that. You have to make it active and pull it in and be a part of it. That's continuous improvement. And that's part of the underlying theme of everything I want to talk about today. Does having the latest iPhone make you more productive? No? Why not? You have to use it, right? I guess I led you into that a little too easily. I made the answer to it. It's kind of like back to that treadmill slide I showed you at the first. I have quite a few friends, you know, I'm at that age, I'm middle age, people having children, they're my friends and associates, and lots of them have treadmills that sit in their home and never get used, right? It's the same sort of scenario. We've got to be using it. So I suggest use your schedule. And the process of that project, then this is a procedure chart. Now, our company had all sorts of procedures on how to use a schedule and what to do with it and all those sort of things. The difference was on that project, the act of independently thinking it through and creating a project-specific set of procedures, details. You see there's lots of information there. The overview, and the projector is not quite clean enough to see it, it has contractual purposes of the schedule, is what's written right here, and then the concept behind the schedule. Concepts like our schedule is the plan of action. Okay? Planning well prepares us to save time and effort. Communicating where we are and how the plan is going allows us to improve. Okay? Following the improved plan makes us successful. Those are the concepts that we were after there. And we included those in our procedures to try to bring people back to the pure purpose of the schedule. Because so often on your projects, the schedule will fall back to some sort of just reporting tool. Just something that people fill out, or they like to call pencil whip it once in a while, right? And we don't want to be doing that. We want to be making real progress and real improvements on our projects. So that was a step on that project. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about that is when we started really digging into this and started working into it, I got some skeptics, right? Okay, we always have a schedule, but we don't ever follow it the way you're trying to follow it. We just don't do it that way. We've never done it that way before. All of these sort of questions. I can tell you, I love the skeptics. Okay, the skeptics are my best friend because they will tell me everything that's about to go wrong. And that gives me a heads up, and I fix it before it goes wrong. Right? It's like having a premonition out there, right? This is going to fall apart because no one's ever going to actually look at that thing and read it. Okay. So I put a plan in place to make them look at it and make them read it, right? You know, put it on the daily reports every day. They're required to fill in the schedule activity they were working on that day. Next thing you know, they're carrying it around in their back pocket and actually looking at it, right? And you get all this sort of feedback from your skeptics. Listen closely to them. Now, about half of those skeptics, once you start making the changes and you start adopting the things that they talk to you about half of them will come on board. The other half will just get bitter and go on their way. Let them go. You know, as soon as they stop giving you advice on how to fix everything, just don't worry about them anymore. Okay? And so the trick with skeptics is to say, thank you, why doesn't that work? Always give them a good thank you, right? It disarms them a little bit. It's kind of fun to see their face go, what? And so it worked, okay? This is a picture of that project getting ready for a record-setting concrete pour. It was a huge deal. It would end up being a 36-hour straight pour, sort of things like that. And this was getting ready for it. The whole deal was no one ever thought we'd make it on time. And of course we did. And the whole trick was to get it done before Christmas, because I found out that concrete cures for 5 to 7 days. And if your entire project is one big mat slab that's curing for 5 to 7 days, everybody got to go home for Christmas. It was beautiful, right? And so not only was the owner happy, but every employee on the project was happy, because it basically shut down the week of Christmas. Okay. I mentioned we had BIM on the project. It was a pilot project. It was the very beginning. It was successful based on the time it took place. It was very successful based on what we figured out and what we learned. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, Thomas Edison never had a failure. He just knows 100 different ways it doesn't work. Well, I know a couple ways BIM doesn't work now. But I got this cool slide out of it, right? So, and on top of that, I got another thing that was really good. A second cool slide. All right, so the reasons that didn't work came back down to we just didn't have a process yet. We had a technology and everybody was modeling, but nobody really knew what to do with it, and so it was equivalent to the treadmill or elliptical sitting in the corner of the room. All right, everybody tried to use it. They kind of did a little bit here and a little bit there, but there just wasn't a program. And so we apply a little bit of lean to that. We take a plan, do, check, act cycle. Okay? So coming into that, yeah, we kind of had a plan, but no, it wasn't a very good one because we were just inexperienced, right? And then we did it. Well, when we did it, during the do cycle, you have to collect some data. You have to keep track of how things go. And then after it's done, you have to step back and you check all that data and you go through and you analyze it and you see, well, where were the failings? What happened? Why didn't this work? Then you act on that information and you make changes to your plan and how you're going to do it, and then update, you're back into your plan cycle again. Now this doesn't have to be a 2-year or a 3-year process, right? This could be as simple as your exercise plan, right? I mean, now they make it easy. I mean, how many of you guys have like a little Fitbit or one of those little wearable things? Anybody in here have one of those? All right, we have a couple. All right, I see more and more of them coming around. That's all this is. It's a feedback cycle, right? You make a plan on how much exercise you're going to get. You go do the exercise. You check to see if you actually did it. You revitalize your plan. You come back after it again, right? That's what those things are. We get so much of that going on in our lives, sometimes we don't even notice it. What I want you to do is to start noticing that and make it a direct effort of improvement. Start realizing everything that you do, have a plan coming into it, collect a little bit of data to see if it worked, go back through it, and just start running that little cycle. You can do it in the mornings when you're sitting there kind of waking up trying to think it through. You kind of start thinking that through. Okay, yesterday. Okay, what plans did I make? What did I do? It only takes a few minutes. But that is Kaizen. That is small, continuous, incremental improvement. And then you're continually getting a step and step better. And I'm not just talking about construction. I'm talking about in everything we do. Why not improve our lives all the way around? Okay, so Kaizen is also known for good change. And that's actually probably the purest translation of it, is good change. But that's what we need to use it for, is identifying the items that we really want to improve upon and making those steps. So let's look here at that second project. So on this one, we learned from the first project and we started doing the schedule. This time, instead of going to the contractors to try to figure out what your schedule update was, I started involving them even more in the process. What we did on this project is we stepped in and we said, your entire payment, if you're going to get any money for the work you did, it is directly tied to the schedule. Right? Now, some get cost-loaded schedule, things like that. You hear that all the time. You don't have to have the federal requirement of a cost-loaded schedule to make that happen. Why not just pool everybody on the project into the schedule via the thing that most people are usually worried about, the dollars? If you can pull it back in and tie it back to the dollars, most people will pay attention to it. And so that's what we did on this project. So this was what was required for the pay application. And then, of course, our process flow, we improved it. That first spreadsheet was pretty hard to read through and understand. This one became much simpler for people to follow. We actually had the process. We talked about what was sent in. We tied the schedule to the pay application. We did the review process. And this just kept cycling through the project. But we tried to not only improve the process itself, but improve how we communicated the process. So there's all of these different aspects and ways that you can just look for that way to make something better each time. And then, of course, on this project, we did BIM a little differently. Now, on the other one, we had some really cool pictures. We'd actually modeled some stuff. But coming into this prison project, then the designers, the software wasn't ready. Okay, that's the easiest way to put it. We could have tried to force it. We could have tried to push it through like we had on the other pilot program. The software still wasn't there yet. And so what we did is we just used kind of a lower level of BIM. Right? I just whipped out SketchUp. And whenever we needed that higher level of visualization, we just created it specific in that instance. Because the investment to try to push that through might have eliminated the profit on the project. And that's not lean. Right? Every company you work for needs to make money. Right? That's what our economy is based on. That's how we continue forward. And if they're not making money, that's equivalent to they're not producing value. Right? They're consuming more than they're providing. And we need to take that from a company level to an individual level. Every one of us needs to be producing more than we are consuming. And that is adding value not only to our company or to a client, it's adding value to society, it's adding value to the world around us. So those are the goals that we're striving for. So whatever level you're on, just make the adjustments, and if you have to scale down the level to provide the right amount of value, scale it down. But it's continuous improvement when we're said and done. So like on this project, we ended up, lots of people are asking me, they weren't sure it was good change because they were scared of it. I felt like I had a dinosaur on a leash, right? I knew it was a friendly dinosaur and it really wasn't going to eat anybody, but everybody else was running away scared, right? Lots of people are going to view BIM that way. They viewed the changes of the schedule that way. We've never done it this way before. This is too much work. It's too hard. It's going to fall apart. But how did I get through that? I listened to the skeptics. They told me everything was going to go wrong, and I fixed it. So we want to make sure that we're looking for good change. And what I found when that happens, when people are scared and the change has got them running, click again. There we go. All right. Patience and genuine caring. Now, we don't hear that much in the construction industry, right? We need to genuinely care. I know lots of the senior people that I deal with quite often. They were in a different, I guess, era. They were taught differently. The idea was just kind of yell at everybody till they do it, right? Have you guys met those people before, right? Okay. So what's happened is our society is changing. We have generations, and they adjust and they move through. Okay, that was a generation, and we need to work through that change. I think one of the major aspects of something that we need to do is not pretend to care. You have to actually care about the people around us. And what gets really hard for some managers and superintendents is actually caring about the contractors that work for them. Actually caring about whether the mason is being successful on the project. Sure, they fail, and we can pull the bond, and we can hire somebody else, and we can push the project through. But I don't think that's the best long-term strategy for any company. We need to genuinely care about our partners. The owner hired us as a construction manager, right? But we've learned that well, let's take it a step back. They hire us because they don't feel as if they have the complete knowledge set. They want to go to a professional to be able to take care of it. And so they hire us. Now let's take that the next step. We turn around and we hire a general contractor, or maybe we go direct prime to the electrician. Okay, why do we hire the electrician? Because we don't feel as if we have the direct knowledge set to perform that scope of work. It's just one step down. We want the owner to treat us like professionals, and we'd like the owner to have us get a profit. Okay? We should have the same thing going on with everybody that we hire. And if we start doing that, that's kind of a culture change. That actually adjusts significantly how we do things. And I'm going to circle back around to that in a few minutes. Okay, that was some of the lessons on that project moving forward. Now, I'm going to talk about basically a current project, and we've recently created a pretty neat little video that I want to pull up and show you. Now, I just thought it was great that Ralph also talked about CenturyLink in his video, right? And then I'm coming around and talking about CenturyLink's corporate headquarters. And that's what this is as of 17 September, which was just a couple weeks ago. These were video shots that we took of the CenturyLink corporate headquarters that's being built in Monroe, Louisiana. Okay, so that project is currently underway. And I've also found that it takes about 15 to 30 minutes for people to completely forget there's a camera in the room, right? We set up in that project management meeting they showed the clips of, and that ended up being like 4 hours of meetings that day, and they set up in the morning and just kept running the meetings, and it took a little while for them to forget the camera was there, and then they started getting into real conversations and real things happening, and that's where we pulled those clips from. They were sitting around a model, working on the project, figuring out how to make it happen. And so let's look a little bit more at the project. Okay, the clip helps you see it is a spectacular building. It's the sort of building I'm in construction to build. It's beautiful. It had that monumental stair. You saw that steel hanging out there. That's just so you know, if you haven't had a chance to go out on projects yet, when people start doing round means money. It costs a lot more to build things round, right? And so that big round staircase that looked like it's flying, that is one of the features of that building, and it is absolutely beautiful. And when it's finished, it'll be great. But so this building, you can see lots of round, okay? Really pretty, beautiful building. If we took and we sliced it and come through, then this is a mechanical over here in the parking garage, and so all of your mechanical and supplies all have to come back over to the 4th floor penthouse to support everything. All this rounded columns, sloping roof out here in front. All that ends up being a green roof when it's done, so it's going to fit in with that. You saw the picture earlier. It's sitting in a bunch of pecan trees, and so here it is, kind of in an urban setting, but it's just set like across the street against a river, and it just has this rural feel to it that just really goes with the culture of the company we're building for. And so here we have this really just beautiful building that is being built, and what's the most famous thing in Monroe, Louisiana right now? What? Yeah, that building and Duck Dynasty, right? I mean, that's what Monroe is known for right now, is Duck Dynasty. And those gentlemen, they are really fun to watch on TV because they're just I guess they want to be a redneck, right? I guess that'd be the term to use. I was trying to think of some other way to say it, but it just wasn't coming to mind, right? They just, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great. And so this project, well known for that, but that size and scope of project, like you pointed out, that building is particular. When the governor of the state shows up at the groundbreaking of your building, you know you have a very important building in the state. And so coming into that with it being such an important building, and here we know that it's $120+ million to build it, and we want to do BIM on the project, and we want to use this new technology and make it happen, we're in Monroe, Louisiana. And so when the governor says we're so excited for this project to be bringing all of these jobs into Monroe, that means that all of our contractor base needed to come from Monroe, Louisiana. Anybody want to harbor a guess, out of 29 subcontractors, how many of them do you think had done BIM before? Zero? I can take any answer between 0 and 1 because someone kind of halfway did it once, right? And so, so here we want to come into this and use all of this great new technology, and they just weren't ready for it. So how do we make that happen? And so I've got another clip that I'm going to pull up. Now this is one of the managers on the project, and her job was transitioning, and we realized we had to have a consultant, somebody that could spend a lot more time with these contractors than our team was able to give, to teach them how to do BIM, why we were doing it, to help them improve and change their processes from a different perspective. See, because my team, the CM team on the project, would have been focused on the model, the building, the end game. By being able to get those contractors to hire this consultant, they were paying the consultants, not us. Okay, then that changed that relationship, and that consultant could focus on helping them improve their processes. She was in charge of the transition, and she had some very important comments that played along nicely in this.
A lot of the subcontractors were very overwhelmed when they look at their shop drawings and say, I have to create this virtually. They're like, how do you go from here to building it in a model? So for instance, conduit, they think, oh wow, that's a lot of modeling, a lot of small pieces. And so you just have to kind of help them navigate that process so it's less overwhelming and look at it in small pieces instead of the overall picture. So go phase by phase.
Part of the reason I really wanted to show that clip is her comment in there where she says, and go phase by phase. Okay? That is a principle of Lean, is small batch sizing. Now quite often we think you have to do a whole bunch of something to be efficient, that you have to be a big company to be efficient, that you have to, you know, that you can't. Okay, earlier we're talking about cell phones in the previous presentation, that you can't have a cell phone company unless you're one of the 3 major players out there. Our society has changed a little bit. We're no longer in the industrial age, right? In the industrial age, yeah, that's how we measured success, and it was by capital. How many workers do you have? How big is your factory? Anybody familiar with what age we're in now? The information age. Thank you very much. There is something that is very distinctly different in that. Okay? When you're in the industrial age or the agriculture age, right? How did you share wealth? You barter, right? If I wanted to give somebody, I had to give them the cow or the sheep, right? It was gone. I didn't have it anymore. Now if I'm in industrial age, right, I have to give away some of my workforce, or I have to give them cash. I have to give them. Now in the information age, when I give something away, I'm here today, right? I'm here today giving you away valuable information, right? It's not gone from me. I still have it, and now you have it, and we've built that much more. I can continue to take my information and build on it and go forward. And you guys can take the same information I'm giving today and you go out and you step forward. It is a completely different economic of measuring wealth. And it's changing the very nature of our society. And you're going to see how that rolls into construction. You're going to see that some people haven't seen that yet, and they're still trying to pull the information in tight and trying to hold it in. Now I can tell you, if some of the biggest companies in the world realized they had to start open sourcing their information and open sourcing things, that individuals aren't going to be able to hold out. The whole premise of our new information age is that we're not gatherers or holders of information, we're distributors, and the people that rise to the top in the wealth cycle are those that are creating and distributing the information. And so gathering, analyzing, creating, putting it back out there is how we're going to be successful. You see how that changes the nature of our construction project? Being able to quickly gather and push the pertinent information. Which leads me to another interesting thought. Anybody want to harbor the difference between data and information? I'm sure you guys have heard of big data.
Yeah,
One's organized. That is correct. And we can take it a step further. Past organized, one is used. It's all data until somebody uses it. And as soon as it's being applied and making us more productive, then it becomes information. And so don't be out there on your projects just pushing data. Don't be sitting in your classes letting the data flow past you. Be using it and turning it into information, because that is the age we are in, and it's the only way you'll gain wealth. All right, now back to our previously scheduled program. All right, so one of the ways that consultant came on to help us was, well, I need to give you a little history. That Eichert Consulting is who we said, who ended up helping us, and the reason they did is because we had a pre-bid meeting with all these contractors that were really scared of BIM and this process. And so we went out to quite a few different companies and said, hey, we're having a pre-bid meeting. All of these contractors are going to be here. They're not sure what BIM is. Please get in touch with them. A bunch of them called and started talking to contractors and going through the phone list and reaching out. Eichert Consulting brought a person there to the pre-bid meeting, and they were in the room. And it was amazing to watch all the contractors flock to that knowledge source, because he was asking questions that they didn't know what BIM was, but he was getting into the whys. You know, what's your execution plan? How are you going to do all of this? What is the requirements? And so he came there with one contractor, because that one had basically said, yeah, I'm probably going to hire you, and he left there with 8. And so they became a hub of the project. So one of the important things they did, it actually stems into what you guys are going to be doing tomorrow morning. Okay? I don't think you're using a DISC profile, but I believe tomorrow morning is emotional intelligence. Is that correct? It's dealing with other people. On this project, they went out and they did a DISC profile for a whole bunch of different people, about everybody they could get to on the project. What a DISC profile does is it looks at our default behaviors and kind of where we fall in those ranges. And they didn't just turn that into data, they made it information. They encouraged people to share their DISC profile with others and figure out the best way to communicate with another person. Because you guys have all had that person you just can't seem to talk to, and you don't know why. It just never seems to work. And so understanding the DISC profile of the other person helps you to see things the way they go about them. And so I can't get deeply into DISC profile. I'm going to save that for tomorrow morning, but pay attention to that emotional intelligence tomorrow and be knowing it from the perspective of how does this help me communicate with others. You'll probably get some insights into yourself if you haven't done something like that before. Wonderful insights into your own nature, right? Can you imagine that every one of us can be categorized? We don't like that idea of being categorized, but it works very nicely and it helps. Okay. So then we started having meetings, pulling them together. You start getting the guys in the room, you start understanding how to talk to them, and things start to click. And we needed to have somebody there that could run the software. Okay? That person, it would be nice if that person understood construction and knew how to build things, but for this purpose, all they needed to do is run the software. And the gentlemen in the room that were very familiar with how to build a building could then go to the right areas and talk about what needed to happen. They just needed that bit of assistance. They just needed somebody to be able to give them that extra nudge to get them going. And so on this project, we had contractors buying their first computer. Right? Guy had a fax machine, but he went and bought his first computer on this project. And he plans to buy a second, that's a victory, right? Right? And we had some that were really good, that, and we had some guys, they already had their tablets, they had their phones, and all of a sudden they're using those out there, and they're just diving right into it and making progress. But what happens is, nobody's ever going to be in the same place. We can't go into something assuming that everybody's just going to come right along and all be a part of it and it's all going to work great. We have this wonderful bell curve of adoption for people. And if you guys aren't familiar with adoption curves and technology adoption, you ought to look it up and see how those adoption curves fall together. And so we were able to bring everybody along well enough to make the project successful. Now, my original plan was to walk you through some of those details of how we did all of that, but I've taken a different course as I've been going through the slides. And so I'm going to kind of skip through a couple of these because, I mean, this was our plan. I showed you before with the schedule. We wrote procedures. We wrote detailed plans. Some of these are highlighting some of the nuances of BIM and how to change them. If you are particularly interested in nuances of BIM, feel free to get a hold of me. I can give you all the nuance you want. All right. I do think that every one of you, who in here is familiar with the BIM Forum level of development specification? A few? Okay. All of you ought to go download this document because BIM is going to be such a part of your environment when you come out. This is the definition. This gives you terminology to talk to other people with. It's not how to play the game. It's not the rules. It's just the definitions. But it is such a key starting point. We include it in every one of our specifications. On the other side, we wrote out what they're going to model and what they're going to do. That's this side of the page. But this specification gives us the definitions and a common understanding. Because you guys, you can't just turn, let's see, a good example. All right, here we go. If I took my 12-year-old daughter and I said, okay, it's time for you to start doing the dishes. I want you to use Dawn soap. And then just who knows what kind of quality I'm going to get back, right? Are they even going to be clean? Are they going to be rinsed? What's going to happen, right? So that's what people are doing so often with BIM. They're saying, hey, we're going to use BIM. Here, use this piece of software. And that's all we say. I have literally seen contracts that there was a line added almost the very bottom. There was still some little print at the bottom underneath it, the really fine stuff they don't want you to read. But right above that was a line that said, this project will use BIM. It's the same premise. Here, use this soap. There's no definition or spec to it. And so you've got to have a plan rolling into that. And use the BIM execution plan. Use the Penn State BIM execution plan. We did our own BIM execution plan because I found the Penn State one to be, it's very thorough, and that thoroughness is a little more than most people are willing to bite off the first time in. Okay, so if you want to get into that, you can. Just let me know and I can give you all the details you want. Now, one of the other things that we did on this project is we practiced. Okay, before we told them to go out there and model the entire building, we knew we had to do this mock-up. And so we didn't just shortcut on the mock-up or just tell them, hey, go figure it out. We had them completely model the entire mock-up for the project. And when they shipped out these pieces over to Texas in order to assemble this to do laboratory testing, they shipped out the exact pieces, sizes, and shapes that were going to be assembled. And we learned a lot while we were figuring this out. The subcontractors figured out what an origin point was and how to align those models. They figured out that on the details in the plans, this curb that runs underneath, at one point in time they had part of the building, the designers had part of the building with a curb and part of the building without a curb. And so on this mock-up we said, well, we've got to transition from curb to no curb. So we put that in the mock-up. Couldn't make it happen. There was just no good way to transition the glass over and down a curb and keep your waterproofing intact. And so that process allowed us then to eliminate the two different details and just drop to one curb everywhere. And it was pretty easy to make the change. But we found that out then. Right? If we hadn't done it this way, for one, they would have showed up with all their parts in Dallas, and our mock-up would have been weeks later because they've been trying to figure out how to make it work instead of figuring it out in a model. And then if we hadn't done the mock-up, is a whole nother step. If we hadn't done the mock-up, they would have been out there at that beautiful building you saw, installing all that glass, finding out that it leaked. And so the vast majority of suits within our industry, of the legal cover your tail sort of thing you're talking about earlier, come back to waterproofing and leaks. Yes, sir?
I have a question. Who's actually modeling if your trades never use computers or any of that?
Ah, good point. So what happens is almost everybody that does shop drawings, that's been doing shop drawings for years and years, then they have been drawing and they've been using computers, right? It was the installers that had not been using the computers. And so that was the transition for them, right? So what happens is, Ralph put it very well earlier, BIM doesn't change anything. It just changes how we do everything, but it doesn't change anything. And so we still needed shop drawings, effectively, from all the contractors. And they still needed some sort of a draftsman to do that. So all the matter was getting those drafters to draft everything in a model format instead of in 2D. So they were the ones doing the drafting. And in some cases, Eichard, who was their consultant, was doing the drafting. So a lot of these guys, the new step was communicating via the computers to get those same set of documents that they would have been producing anyways. That leads me to another point that I throw in here. Okay, Lean is what I'm talking about, being more productive, more efficient. It helps bring costs down and helps do all of this. I'll tell you right now, BIM shouldn't cost you anything. If it's costing you money, you're probably not doing it right. All right? Okay? Now, I'll give you some leeway, like on this project, the first time through, right? Then people aren't going to be very efficient. But by the time the second or third time through, it should be exceptionally profitable. And so when you go out there and you're in companies and you're promoting BIM, you're promoting lean changes, don't be going out there saying we need a whole bunch of money to do it. Figure out how to do it more efficiently with the tools that are in place. So I'll throw that in there as a bonus. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so did you use it for coordination, fault detection?
We did. We used it for coordination and clash detection and making sure that everything aligned within the building. There's lots of story behind that on this particular project. I could do a 2-hour presentation on the project itself, but and I cut some of those slides out. But the architect and structural engineer had modeled their project. Your MEP design had not done any modeling, and so you had the benefit of model for part of the design. And then what happened, and when we started pulling the subcontractors in, all those nuances on drawings that are hard to see. You get the superintendents on projects that are just so good at taking those drawings and building it all in their head and seeing what it's going to look like. They'll catch 90% of the issues. Okay? It's that other 10% is what I'm really after. And if we model it, not only is the superintendent, everybody on the project can see 99.5% of all of the issues, and it becomes very visual. It was somewhat embarrassing for some of the designers that did not model. Now, they're good designers and they're following standard practices. But what it did is it made visual the standard mistakes that would have been acceptable on 2D drawings in some instances, right? The things that we've put up with for years, right? Part of that productivity drop-in because we've yet to industrialize construction, okay? That starts to come to light when you model because now we can visualize it and we can see it. Yes, sir?
So what did you actually do to improve the productivity? Did you use value stream mapping?
All right. So there's various points that improve the productivity. So let me take and go here, here. Level of development. That level of development document I was showing you, okay? It gives us some definitions and we start talking about it. What I wanted to address real quick is the difference between 350 and 400. Okay, so if you're taking a contractor and you're doing coordination, you need at least a level 350. Level 350 gives you all the information you needed to coordinate. That increases productivity because we make sure everything is going to fit before they install it. It greatly reduces your rework. So that is one of the big steps of coordination to improve it. Guys can go out there with confidence. For some of you have been on projects, some of you have not. Quite often, I've been on projects where they're like, these drawings just aren't worth anything. We can't even follow them because they're not completely coordinated, and they have to change it. And so then they stop following the drawings, right? And they're just kind of making it up as they go, right? I think there's a whole movie about Legos and making them up as you go, right? It's kind of fun and it looks neat, but everything's just kind of chaos. Sometimes it's okay to have that. So if you're a kid playing with your dad's Legos, it's okay to have chaotic things built. But when we're out there in the industry, are we allowed to build chaos? Chaos is the enemy. It is the #1 enemy on our projects. So don't think it's the architect. Don't think it's the owner. Don't think it's anybody else. The enemy is chaos in every instance. And if we can eliminate chaos, we're being successful. So that was one step towards productivity right there. The next step comes if we can go to level 400. Okay? So at 350, you're not going to model small diameter piping because it's just not efficient. They can bend the 3/4 inch conduit on their own out there in the field. It just costs less to do it that way. Now, when those individual contractors take the next step and they go to level 400, and their intention and their purposes are what make all of the difference right there. If their purpose is to go to 400, that means that they are planning on prefabricating and modularizing. That means they are bending conduit out in a yard or in a shop or somewhere like that and putting all the bends in already. So the guy out there in the building, he's just putting Legos together with a set of instructions and he's just cruising right through. Then you start to see 20% reduction in labor costs. Then you start to see significant changes. Okay? But it takes a paradigm shift. This idea that we can figure it out more effectively in the computer and prepare the materials in a controlled environment and then send them out to the field and they just snap them together. But for years and years and years, everybody's thought, no, we have to go, it's just cheaper to assemble it in the field. Somebody has to figure it out. And the driving factor behind that was on a 2D coordination process and with standard drawings, you couldn't figure it out detailed enough to make it happen. The computers couldn't support it. Well, they can now. And if you take that step and get that level 400, you start seeing huge productivity gains. Because what happens then, you get your fabrication, you get your assembly line. Now, the assembly line, we're not going to roll the building through some other bigger building on a bunch of rollers, right? How do we get the assembly line? It's more of an assembly parade. You walk the contractors in right behind each other. They walk into their area, they install what's there. With that assembly line, they're assembling that car for you, does that guy have to think about how this dashboard slips into place? Does he have to try to configure it? No, it's all figured out. It's just a matter of assembling it. And they put it in because it's just a little complex for a computer. Right? It's too complex. The robot can do all of the nuts and bolts and all those sort of things, right? But there's some things that just takes a person to work into place because there might be a little bit of variance. But he doesn't have to take time to think about it. You have what, 18 seconds? That's like standard time for a lot of them, right? You got 18 seconds to get your part, put it in, and it's just moving right on down. We want that sort of parade through our building. Guys walk in there a couple hours, they've put up all the conduit or the grid in the ceiling, or they've laid the carpet or whatever needs to take place without having to sit down and figure out what they're doing. We've figured it all out virtually, we've figured it out on the computer, and all they have to do is assemble. We still need the craftsmen, they still need the drawings to understand how it's going in and where it's going in, but they don't have to rethink everything, each individual person. That is where the true productivity of BIM lies, and that is our best opportunity to change that curve. Did I answer your question?
I guess I'm more curious how you did it on this project. Were you guys at 400? How did you track what it was?
There was no 400 on this project. None of those contractors are ready to do that. We're seeing 400 in other locations. Oh, I'm sorry, steel.
Sure.
The steel manufacturer, they've been doing level 400 for years and years and years. They just crank that out in a heartbeat. No thoughts, no questions. But very few of the other trades were prepared to go that far. It's small, continuous, incremental improvements. Yes, sir?
And so I guess the big challenge with them, where it kind of fails right now, is with existing, whether it's roadway or a new tenant, what have you. You can't really, the productivity kind of struggles compared to building new building.
Okay, so the question is, the BIM.
Have you been able to use them effectively when you're dealing with existing ones?
Oh yes, existing. So when you step into existing, you laser scan it all, right? And if you laser scan it, that's your model, and you build everything inside of it. It is greatly more efficient for existing than it even is for new construction, because in existing conditions, we just went through that doing a project in Memphis, Tennessee, with over 100-year-old building that the owner very much wanted to look like a 100-year-old building when they were done, and trying to keep the existing things in place. And at the beginning of it, we see a lot of it is people and influence. At the beginning of it, we kept saying, hey, we ought to get this laser scan. And the owner's like, no, we're not going to do it. We gave you your plans. You just ought to do it. And we were talking to them back and forth. And they had spent weeks of sending somebody out there to try to field measure and document all this stuff. Some guy goes out there, he measures it, he gets down, he writes down what it is, then they go back and then they draw that up later on. All of those process, all of those steps, that's no flow, right? That's very distinct, segmented operations. Without that flow, mistakes are made, right? When you laser scan it, you go out there, you do it, you have the information. You can come back to the information anytime you want. Did I answer your question? No?
I mean, as long as the laser scan isn't doing X-ray from all the walls.
If you use ground penetrating radar, you could. But yeah, and that's the thing is you have to, it's better than not. I can tell you that, right? So it's not perfect yet, right? Please don't wait for BIM to be perfect before you do it, right? Please don't wait for anything to be perfect. Definitely don't wait for perfect before you get married or anything. Otherwise, I'd never gotten married. All right. Okay. Yeah, no one would have taken me. I'm not perfect yet. All right. So I am running out of time. I was going to talk to you about AIA produced LOD 500. I was going to tell you why LOD 500 doesn't work. That is kind of fun, though. I'm going to tell you BIM should eliminate as-builts. Okay? You guys should never have to do an as-built. Just so you know, start thinking along those lines. Okay? Okay? BIM should be efficient. Okay? When you're starting to collect that owner information, all of that data that owner wants to manage their building for the next 30 years, it is not an additional step. It is not something you wait and do at the end. It is something you do during the rest of your process. If you wait at the end and you eliminate the flow and you make an additional step, there's about an 85% chance you will fail in providing that information correctly. Okay? So, let's sum it up at the end. Come on. My computer says it's done. It looks like I might just be done. I was going to read you a really cool quote. There's a book called The Owner's Dilemma, written by Barbara White Bryson. And I was going to read you the back cover of that book. It talks about how the owners have the most power to influence change within the construction industry. It is exceptionally appropriate in this venue because so often we are CM agents and we are effectively the owner, right? We have all of the power and the influence that the owner would have. And in those instances, then yes, we should be able to make the positive change that is needed in our construction industry. So let me try to sum up a paragraph as quickly and as decisively as I can from memory. So a little background on Barbara White Bryson. She was an owner's representative for Rice University. And so she was on the owner's side and had participated in building lots of buildings. And she noticed the trend, and I think a lot of you noticed the trend, that the organizations that build a lot of buildings, they've started to figure out that design, bid, build doesn't work very well, right? Hence, construction management, CM agencies, CM at risk, design build projects. And so one of the big things she talks about is the value myth of competitive bidding. Okay? If we go out there and we individually try to address our risk pockets and say we're going to pay for design and get the lowest possible price for design, and we're going to pay for construction and get the lowest possible price for construction, and we break it up like that, we're not getting the best value for the project as a whole. Okay? Let's think about that. How many of you, the last time you wanted to buy a car, went out there and said, let's see, I'm going to get the best possible value I can on a motor, and I'm going to get the best possible value I can on a chassis, and the best possible value I can on these doors. And how many of you Frankensteined your car? Oh, you did? Or your question? Okay, so there is always somebody that is that mechanically aptitude that they can do that, right? And I commend you for it. But I have to tell you, we can do better than that with our buildings, right? Now, there's going to be the occasional person like him that can turn around and produce that building in that manner and do it well. But as a whole, we need to be looking more at the entire risk picture. And that is one of the major influences of BIM and Lean that we can take. Barbara White Bryson explains that very well in her book. Let's see if I'm going to get anywhere yet. I am not. All right. Close, restart. We're going to respond. Let's see what we do here. Let's try, wait for just a moment. But I think I am almost out of time. So I had a really cool set of slides that walk you back through all the ovals that says Kaizen was good change and you should implement good change. And then I step back into Kaizen was continuous incremental improvement and you should be continually improving what you're doing. And I walk back through all of that in individual steps. I also had a really neat clip I wanted to end with from a movie called A Beautiful Mind. How many of you have seen A Beautiful Mind? Okay, that is probably one of the larger groups when I go do presentations that has seen The Beautiful Mind. It is a neat movie. Lots of people don't raise their hand and then they see the clip like, oh yeah, I did see that. But okay, the premise of A Beautiful Mind is you have John Nash, who created the Nash equilibrium. And he is the star of the movie, and they actually have a scene where they show, or they imagine where he is dreaming up the Nash equilibrium. What the Nash equilibrium is he realized that Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, was close but not complete, that it needed revision. Okay? So what Adam Smith's premise was individual ambition serves the common good. And that is the basis of Western economics, of our U.S. economic system, right? Each contractor, each company is serving their own individual interests. What he figured out and proved with the Nash equilibrium and got a Nobel Prize for was that we can do better than that. What we do is we look to serve our own interest and the interest of those around us at the same time. And if we take that focus off of ourselves and turn it into creating value for the team, value for the project, value for the community, whatever it is that is just a step beyond ourselves, we end up being that much better for it. So I like showing that at the end, and I want to challenge each of you as you go forth. Strive to implement change to improve yourself, and in the process, strive to improve all of those around you. Thank you very much.